My son collapsed at work and his billionaire boss rushed him to the ER. Then the doctor asked if he was the father. Mr. Cross, I need to ask you something. Are you Tyler's father? The question hung in the sterile air like a detonator. Monitors beeped. Nurses froze. The man in the tailored suit went pale. I don't know, he stammered. I don't. Say it, the doctor whispered, eyes burning. Look at him and say what you already know. He looked. He really looked. At the eyes, the stubborn jaw, the way the young man's brow tightened even in sleep. His own expression mirrored on a face he had mentored but never named. Dear God, he breathed. Tyler is my son. Have you ever heard a sentence that rewrites your entire life in a heartbeat? Have you ever stared at someone you thought you knew and realized you never knew yourself? My name is Dr. Phillips, and this is Love and Twilights, where true love meets hard truths. If you believe in second chances, in secrets that finally choose the light, and in families worth fighting for, lean in. Don't blink, because what begins with a collapse will end with a miracle. If stories like this light a fire in you, tap like right now, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a heart that finds its way home. The morning Tyler Hayes collapsed felt like a perfect day pretending not to be a storm. The sun burned clean and patient behind the glass towers of Cross Industries. San Francisco felt like a promise made of salt air and ambition. Tyler rose before dawn, clipped his tie, packed his notebook, and straightened the lines that made him feel like he fit. He boiled coffee until it tasted like courage. He intended to nail his quarterly presentation the way he'd been nailing everything, since he earned his place at one of the country's most elite tech firms. He was 22. He was hungry. He was sure. Big day, he told himself, practicing in the bathroom mirror. The mirror looked back with gray eyes and a determined set to the mouth that always made people think he was older than he was. Remember your transitions. Read the room. Don't speak too fast. Smile at the CFO. Breathe. He breathed. The room rippled, just a fraction, as if heat made the air sway. He blinked. The motion stopped. He took a sip of coffee and only then noticed the dull throb in his temples that had become a quiet neighbor over the last few weeks. Stress. He had told himself it was stress. Anyone would get headaches when you lived on espresso and 12-hour days. Anyone would see stars when you were this close to building a future. He tossed 2 aspirin into his mouth and left. Cross Industries looked like the future had leased a lobby. Marble, steel, glass polished to the kind of clarity that made you feel transparent. Tyler's badge clicked green against the scanner. Doors whispered open, and he rode the elevator up with his heart drumming an optimistic beat. Against the drum of the day, a woman from marketing smiled at him like he'd been there forever. The world felt friendly, wide, possible. Morning, Tyler. Greg from analytics punched his shoulder lightly, ready to impress the big man. Tyler grinned, ready to scare him. Good luck with that. Greg chuckled. Julian Cross scares the weather. It was half a joke and half the way everyone talked about Julian. The man wore power like a second skin. He was tall without being imposing, sharp without feeling cruel, and always 2 steps ahead without showing you how. He had a voice that turned rooms quiet not because he demanded silence, but because he made silence feel like an invitation to think with him. People said he was ruthless. People said he was brilliant. People said he had no time for anything that didn't move the needle. Tyler didn't know about ruthless. He had seen brilliant. Because on his first week at Cross, after a 60-second exchange about a dataset, Julian had remembered his name, his alma mater, and the fact that he liked his coffee black. There was a way he watched Tyler in meetings that felt like being measured and believed in simultaneously. It made Tyler feel chosen. It made him feel seen in a way he wouldn't think about too closely. The presentation room waited dressed in floor-to-ceiling windows and a table long enough to seat an army. They set up screens and clicked cables into ports that tried to tangle themselves into knots made of anxiety. Tyler stacked his notes even though he knew them by heart. He glanced toward the door as if he could will it to pull the day forward faster. When Julian stepped in, conversation dimmed like sound obeyed him. He wore a dark suit that made lesser men feel overdressed. He nodded to the team, nodded to Tyler, and for a second their eyes held. Recognition flickered there, the recognition of a mentor who had been quietly collecting a young man's promise. A strange warmth lit in Tyler's chest, and he filed it under adrenaline. He did not file it under anything like home. "Let's begin," Julian said, and the room obeyed. Tyler stood at the head of the table and started. He outlined. He bridged. He let data sing instead of sit. He used his hands to make the air into a shape that matched his graphs. When he hit his stride, the numbers clicked into place like they were grateful to be chosen. 2 slides in, the throb behind his eyes flared, a white petal of pain unfolding along his temples. He swallowed, smiled, moved forward. The CFO asked a question, and he answered so cleanly the man's eyebrows lifted. Julian leaned forward, just a fraction, approval. Tyler rode it like a current he didn't have to fight. Slide 5 and his vision double exposed the world. The black lines of his chart crossed themselves. The room tilted 2 degrees and never came back. He blinked, and the tilt didn't change. A warmth ran from the back of his neck to his scalp, like someone had poured something there and it needed to find the ground. He put his hand on the table to steady himself and felt the world pull away. Excuse me, I think I need... Blood spattered his notes like an angry punctuation. The room sucked its breath in. Someone asked if he needed water. Someone else stood up. The edges of the world dimmed to charcoal. Tyler tried to breathe slowly like he taught himself when he cycled uphill. He tried to say he was fine, that stress did this sometimes, that he just needed sugar. His mouth filled with copper. He fell. The body learns you by staying. It becomes your friend in the quiet. It is honest about what you try to deny. When Tyler's body refused him in the conference room, the first person to reach him was not his closest co-worker or the CFO or anyone whose job required caring. It was Julian, running before anyone else moved, chair legs screeching against the polished floor, hands catching Tyler's shoulders before his head could find the table. Tyler. Julian's voice cut through panic. Tyler, stay with me. The young man's head lolled. Blood streaked his upper lip. His eyes fluttered like butterflies trying to land in wind. Call downstairs, Julian said. The words were command and plea. Now, get the car. Cancel the meeting. A hand took the tissue Julian didn't know he was holding. Another hand dialed the internal line that would deliver valet speed the way nothing else did. But Julian didn't wait for the hospital's idea of fast. He picked Tyler up. He did it with awkward tenderness, the way you carry something that you know can break. He carried him through a room of people who practiced not gasping and failed. He carried him down a hallway where glass made shadows of men into truth. He carried him into his own world and chose against it. Outside, the air tasted like salt and clean metal. The car purred alive like it liked being used for something that mattered. Emergency room, Julian snapped to the driver, then to the air, then to the God he didn't talk to. Now, in the back seat, Tyler drifted in and out of a place with edges. He made a sound like apology. I'm sorry. Don't be. Julian dabbed blood from his lip and pretended his hand didn't shake. You don't apologize for bleeding. The city sped by. Julian breathed like he could force oxygen into someone else's lungs. He placed his palm against Tyler's sternum and felt the rise and fall, the rhythm that made human beings into music. Music faltered. He pressed his hand harder and told a stranger's story only mentors tell. You're going to be fine. You will never see me panic again. We're almost there. I've got you. He had a son, and he didn't know it. He had a chance to be a father, and he had been the man he needed other people to see. He didn't know that yet. He just knew he couldn't imagine this young man not existing tomorrow. Sometimes love recognizes itself before the mind can name it. The hospital waited with white walls like folded paper and lights that confessed nothing. Emergency knows when a car belongs to the kind of people who can speed lanes into being. It also knows when someone is important, even if the world hasn't agreed yet. Julian stepped out, lifting Tyler with more strength than experience, and staff appeared. To turn this into a dance, they had practiced 1,000 times for strangers who mattered. Unresponsive after collapse at workplace, a nurse recited as if she could soften facts with rhythm. Seizure activity unknown. Epistaxis. Pale. Diaphoretic. Get him to Bay 3, someone shouted. Get me a CBC, CMP, PTNR, type and screen. Call hematology. Where is hematology? Here. The voice arrived before its owner. It sliced through noise and found a name. Tyler. Dr. Rebecca Hayes didn't remember how her feet moved from the hematology floor to the ER. She didn't remember the doors parting for her or the young nurse stammering her last name. She remembered the sound. The sound that only mothers hear when something has reached for their child. She remembered the way the hallway telescoped and then snapped back like elastic returning to form. She remembered a decade of night shifts and exams and lunchboxes, a life made of choices that narrowed and widened in equal measure. She remembered her son's laugh when he won a middle school science fair. She remembered the shape of his fevered brow when he was 4. She remembered 30,000 tiny moments that made him into her whole life. Tyler. She slid to his side and the world resumed. Are you the attending? An ER resident asked. He looked 20, which meant he was 30, which meant he had learned to ask questions whose answers would save lives and hurt hearts. I'm his mother. She forced the words past a throat that didn't want to be a throat anymore, just a sound. I'm also chief of hematology. You can consult, the resident said gently. He had been trained to follow rules and read faces. You can't be primary. I know. She started working. They cut off Tyler's shirt. They hooked electrodes to his chest until the monitor's green line became the world's most honest sentence. His blood pressure argued with gravity. His pulse fought and faltered and fought again. Rebecca's hands were steady because hands remember what bodies forget. She checked capillary refill, ran a knuckle along his sternum to stimulate response, and used her voice like medicine. Tyler. Sweetheart, it's Mom. I'm here. His eyelashes trembled. He sounded 10. Mom. She looked up to order a stat transfusion and saw him. If time had a face, it would be the moment you recognize the past in the present. The man who stood at the end of her son's gurney looked like her 20s had put on a suit. He looked older, the way a decade and a half asks men to trade what we call arrogance for what we call gravity. He looked like the last person she had expected to see today, or ever. His eyes were storm gray and the same. He had once put his forehead against her forehead and promised an always that didn't belong to his family. Becca. He said her name like a life raft. For a second, she didn't answer because she needed the second. It was ridiculous to need a second. People were bleeding. Her son was bleeding. The father of her son was bleeding into the room like a confession, and still she needed the second. Julian, she said finally, you brought him. I couldn't wait for an ambulance. He looked like a man who had carried something heavy and only realized afterward that it was also fragile. He knew her. He needed to touch her and didn't know how anymore. His hand moved like it remembered 15 years ago and then thought better of it. Thank you. She looked at Tyler because that was what the moment demanded. Hold his hand, Julian. You can do that. He did. Sometimes mercy looks like a small instruction that lets everyone keep breathing. They stabilized what could be stabilized. They ordered what couldn't. They moved fast without panic, because panic is a luxury you cannot afford, when someone else's life depends on you clearing your own field of view. The resident rattled letters like spells, CBC, CMP, PT, PTT, and every letter meant a test that would reveal a truth that would require a choice. Get him to imaging if he doesn't respond to fluids, Rebecca said. But draw labs first. If I'm right, we don't need a CT yet. Right about what? Julian asked. His voice tried to smooth itself into competence and failed. He needed control. He needed to understand. What's happening to him? Rebecca didn't answer because she didn't know. She knew a dozen differential diagnoses that could stitch these symptoms together into something you could treat if you were lucky, and something you could fight like hell if you weren't. She knew patterns. She knew that the blood soaking Tyler's tissue with the wrong shade of red meant more than a nosebleed. She knew the bruises on his forearms that looked like fingerprints memory had left on the body. She knew his pallor wasn't a quirk of fluorescent lights. She knew. She also knew she had once loved the man asking the question more than she loved any idea of herself. She had loved him so thoroughly it had pulled her across years of learning and under nights that would have drowned smaller people. He had left. He had married someone whose family composed charity galas, the way composers wrote symphonies. He had left. Dr. Hayes. The resident arrived like a bridge. Labs are running. He's responsive to fluids. We can move him to a private room. Do it. She squeezed Tyler's fingers. Sweetheart, I need you to listen. We're going to move you upstairs. I'll be with you. We're going to figure this out. He tried to smile because that was the kind of son he was. A boy who had been made to be brave, because he was loved by a mother who had been made to be brave because she had once been left. His mouth barely moved and moved enough. They rolled him out. The gurney's wheels clicked like a metronome. Julian walked on the right side because the left had a rail that wouldn't go down. Rebecca walked on the left because there's always a left to choose so you don't have to look at the right. They reached a private room with glass that wanted to be invisible. Nurses moved like a ballet made of habit and compassion. They fixed lines and numbers and the way people try to control fate with machines. A nurse touched Rebecca's elbow. "Dr. Hayes, Dr. Morrison would like to speak with you and consult." "Now," Rebecca said, though the word felt like a betrayal. "I'll be back, Tyler." "Don't," he said. His voice was a threat. "Don't leave." Julian sank into the chair at the bedside. "I'll stay. I promise." Rebecca looked at Julian. "Keep that promise." She stepped into the hall and inhaled air that didn't smell like her son. She walked into a consult room that looked like a place designed for bad news to sound gentle. Dr. Patricia Morrison stood there with a folder of paper like paper could anchor the world. She was one of those physicians whose presence made complicated conversations bearable. She had a face like a good teacher and hands like someone who had done this so often no part of her was surprised by suffering. She wore flats because heels made a sound that felt wrong in hallways where crying was common. "Becca." Patricia's voice anticipated the breaking. "Sit." "I'll stand." Rebecca wrapped her arms around her chest and tried to look like a physician who had walked this walk with other people. "Say it." "The labs are concerning." Patricia smoothed the first page of results like softness could soften numbers. "Tyler's white blood cells are extremely low. His hemoglobin is dangerously low. Platelets are almost non-existent. Cogs are off. Retic count is suppressed. There's no sign of hemolysis. This looks like severe aplastic anemia." Rebecca closed her eyes. "There are diagnoses that live in your periphery because you have to know them, but you pray you will never meet them in your own house. Aplastic anemia, bone marrow failure. The factory stopped. The body making less of the one thing life requires." She had treated strangers. She had trained fellows. She had written papers and given lectures and found words for other people. She had never found these words for herself. "We can confirm with a bone marrow biopsy," Patricia continued gently. "But the labs are classic. I'm sorry. What are his treatment options?" Rebecca's voice sounded like it came from the hallway. It sounded like she was paging herself. "Don't give me the primer. Give me the plan. For someone his age and with his counts, the best outcomes come from bone marrow transplant. We could try ATG and cyclosporin first, but given his severity, transplant." Rebecca pressed her fingers against the edge of the table until her knuckles throbbed. "We need a donor." "Yes. Immediate family first. A sibling is best. Then parents. If no match, we go to the registry, but his type is rare. We'll type you. Do you know his father's blood type?" Rebecca's mouth opened and closed. "Yes," she said, the word small and huge. "I know. Is his father in the picture?" "He's in the room." She met Patricia's eyes and watched understanding land like a dove and then turn into something hawk-shaped. "He doesn't know." Patricia didn't flinch. Good doctors don't telegraph judgment. They hold the weight and let it be heavy without adding to it. "You need to tell him. We need to type him now." Rebecca nodded. The motion felt like it belonged to someone else. "And Tyler, he'll need to know. Informed consent. He'll need to know what donor cells mean. And he'll need to know his father." The sentence was simple, and it carried 23 years across a bridge made of kindness. Rebecca swallowed something that wouldn't go down. "Give me 30 minutes. You have 15. Patricia's compassion never interfered with triage. "Time matters." Rebecca nodded and left the room. In the hallway she stopped, put her hand against the wall, and remembered breathing as a technique. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2. Out, 2, 3, 4. She did it twice, and then walked back into the room where her son's life was waiting to be saved, and her past waited like a person in a chair. Julian stood as if that could keep anything from falling. What did she say? "Tyler has severe aplastic anemia." Rebecca didn't try to be gentle. Slow truth would not serve anyone here. His bone marrow isn't making enough blood cells. Without treatment, he could die. With treatment, he can live a long, normal life. What do we do? Julian's voice found its purpose. It sounded like every time in his career he'd said, "We move. Tell me what to do. We need a bone marrow transplant. To do that, we need a donor. Close relatives are the first place we look." His face changed. She watched a man look at himself. She watched his fault lines align to form a decision. "Test me. We will." She swallowed. Honesty is a kind of medicine, too. It can sting. It can save. And we need to tell him Who you are. Something in Julian's jaw tightened and then released. He looked at the bed. He looked at the young man with his eyes. He looked back at the woman who had been 22 and fearless, who had built a life out of love and grit. Does he know? He knows his father wasn't able to be part of our lives. Rebecca's voice left nothing to interpretation and left everything to interpretation. He knows he is loved. He doesn't know your name. Julian inhaled like someone had opened a door in winter. We'd tell him now. We'd tell him together. She stepped closer to the bed. Tyler. He opened his eyes. Medications had left a haze there, but they hadn't touched the clarity that had always lived behind them. Mom, I need you to listen. She took his hand and held it the way she had when he was 3 and the world felt too big. We have answers. You have a condition called aplastic anemia. Your bone marrow is tired. It's not making enough blood cells. The best way to fix it is to give your body new cells that know how to do the work. We can do that with a transplant. His eyes broke like sun through fog. Okay, we do that. Where do we get them? From a donor who matches you well. She paused. A family member is our best chance. He looked at her. Something in his face smarted. I don't have any family but you. Rebecca felt the sentence like a cut. She turned her head slightly toward Julian. Tyler, you know my name. You know almost everything about me. There's someone else you need to know. Mr. Cross stepped into the space between truth and the air. He looked smaller than the world had ever let him look. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to speak until words mattered enough to relearn. Tyler. Mr. Cross. Tyler tried to push himself up and failed. Why are you? Because. Julian's mouth opened and closed. He was not used to uncertainty. He let it be. Because I'm your father. Silence is a thing that expands to the size of a room. It moves into corners and under chairs and waits behind the eyes. Tyler stared at the man who had given him a promotion trajectory and a chance to be seen. He stared at the man who had walked like control and now stood like contrition. He stared at his mother, whose hand had not left his, who had never let him feel. Alone until this moment, when alone was a feeling you had to survive to live. No, Tyler's voice didn't break. It bent. No, that's not. You can't just come in here with your suit and your voice and your... He choked on air. You can't say that to me and expect it to just be true. It's true. Rebecca's voice was a hand on a shoulder that had learned to carry too much. I should have told you sooner. I should have told you when you were old enough to hold the truth without letting it crush you. I didn't. That's on me. How long have you known? Tyler's eyes were wet fire. About him. About me working for him. Since the day you told me you got the job. She flinched at the admission. I saw his name. I saw your face. I knew. And you didn't tell me. He confessed the hurt like a prayer. You let me go to work every day and stand in front of this man and not know. I was trying to protect you. She wanted to reach for his face and couldn't. I was trying to protect us. He left, Tyler. He chose something else. I didn't want to bring him into your life just to watch him leave again. I didn't know. Julian's voice cut through gently. Honest. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had known... What? Tyler turned rage into a coat he could wear over fear. What would you have done? You would have been there. You would have picked me up from school and taught me to throw a football, and shown up for science fairs and... He laughed without joy. Would you have? Or would you have sent someone to do it for you? When I was 25, Julian said quietly, I was a coward who let his family decide his life. If I had known then, I don't know what I would have done. That's the truth. But I know what I'm doing now. I'm getting tested. I'm giving you whatever you need. I'm not leaving. Tyler closed his eyes. He looked like a boy who had been taught to be brave by a woman who had to be brave alone. He looked like someone who feared wanting something that could be taken from him. I can't. Not right now. I know, Rebecca whispered. We'll give you space, but we need your consent to test Julian. It's his cells that could save your life. He opened his eyes. Something in them was older. Do it. They drew Julian's blood in a lab that had smelled like latex and alcohol and hope for 30 years. He sat still and watched the vial fill, like something might pull him into it and let him go back. He made phone calls while he waited for a machine to make him a father in a new language. He called his assistant. He called his mother. He called Portia. I can't do the gala. I can't do the tasting. I can't marry you. The words were less cruel than they sounded because they were true. We'll talk tomorrow. No, I can't explain tonight. There's a young man in the hospital who needs me. He hung up on the life he had been living like it was a call he'd been waiting years to end. He went to the hospital chapel because people who don't pray still need a room that looks like a place where miracles can find you. He sat in a pew and stared at wood worn by other people's fingers. He said nothing out loud. He said everything. Rebecca walked by the door and looked in. She didn't step inside because the rule book she'd written for herself didn't have a chapter for this hallway. She went to her own small office and pulled the blinds and allowed herself the privacy of shaking. She remembered a 22-year-old with a ring from a drugstore and a lecture about duty from someone else's father. She remembered sticking her hands in her pockets so she wouldn't beg. She remembered vomit in the mornings and the kind of fear that sharpens and then dulls until you can sleep next to it. She remembered Tyler being small, in a way babies are small, and then big, in a way children are big. She remembered all the times she had chosen not to write Julian's name in the book of their life. Dr. Morrison found her there and knocked gently on the doorframe. "We have preliminary HLA results." "How bad?" Rebecca asked, before remembering not all news carries knives. Patricia's face softened. "He's a 10 out of 10 match. I've never seen a cleaner profile." The air left Rebecca's body with a sound. Relief does that. It knocks things over on its way in. We can schedule. We still need Tyler's consent to move forward with transplant, Patricia said, the professional guardian of rules and souls. But yes, this is the best chance we could have asked for. In the hallway outside Tyler's room, monitors blinked in cycles that meant the body had not given up yet. Rebecca looked at Julian, and for a second, they were the versions of themselves. That had danced in a tiny living room with a record player that skipped. He smiled, small and scared, and for a second she wanted to put her hand in his hair the way she used to. She did not. "We have results," she said. "And?" He was every question he had ever asked investors wrapped in one word. "You're a perfect match." His eyes closed like he was thanking something that might finally accept his gratitude. When he opened them, they were wet and grateful and terrified. "When can I do it?" "We'll prep you tomorrow. Tyler needs to agree to the procedure, and we need to walk him through everything. There are risks." "There's only one risk I care about." He stepped toward the door and stopped. "May I go in with you?" She nodded. "We do this together." Inside the room, Tyler stared at a wall that had never earned his attention. He turned his head when he heard them, the way people turn their heads, when they are too tired to stand up and still want to be ready. "We have a donor," Rebecca said. "Julian is a perfect match." Tyler's eyes shifted from his mother to his boss to the ceiling. "Of course he is." "Tyler," Julian said, standing a little too far from the bed, "the way you stand. When you don't want to assume anything ever again, I know this is everything. If you want me to disappear after the transplant, I will. I'll pay whatever needs paying. I'll do whatever you need me to do. But I want you to know that I want to stay, not because I owe it to anyone else, because I want you in my life, because you're my son." "Stop saying that word like it fixes 23 years, Tyler snapped. He inhaled. He exhaled. "I appreciate the cells. I appreciate that you got me here. I don't appreciate being told the rest of my life in one afternoon. I need time." "You can have all the time," Rebecca whispered. "Just let us save your life first." He nodded. "Just once. Do it." If this story has you on the edge of your seat, subscribe now and drop a comment. Would you have told Tyler everything that night or waited until after the transplant? I'm reading what you think as this unfolds. The hospital became the kind of city that only exists inside a building when the rest of the world doesn't matter. Julian signed forms with hands that knew signatures that built companies, and now learned signatures that built veins. Nurses explained the marrow extraction procedure like they were telling a bedtime story to someone they needed to sleep. He would receive injections for several days to mobilize stem cells if they chose peripheral collection. Or they would take marrow directly from the pelvic bones in a procedure under anesthesia. Rebecca watched Julian agree to the more efficient and most likely marrow harvest approach because speed matters when the body is running out of minutes. "We'll harvest under general anesthesia," Dr. Morrison explained to Julian in pre-op. "You'll be sore for a few days, tired, some back pain, but it's safe. We'll take what we need and your body will replace it." "You can take everything," Julian said, and meant it in a way that embarrassed everyone and made the whole thing holy. Tyler slept as much as his body would allow because sleep is a kind of forgetting and he needed small vacations from thinking. In the moments he was awake, He watched his mother write notes and answered her questions in monosyllables that weren't personal. He let himself look at Julian when he thought the man wasn't looking back. He noticed the way the older man's shoulders slumped, like someone had removed a necessary bolt. He noticed the way he flinched when nurses used Tyler's first name. He noticed the way he stayed. He noticed the way his mouth tightened when 4 alarms beeped. He noticed, 3 floors down, in a coffee shop that sold caffeine to the kind of people whose hands found meaning in holding cups, Portia Blackwell walked in wearing fury like it was silk. She had not called first because her life had never required advance notice. She had never been told no by anyone who mattered for economic reasons. She had met Julian at a fundraiser for literacy and liked the optics of carrying philanthropy on her shoulder like a purse. She had liked the idea of being Mrs. Julian Cross because names change into status in certain zip codes. "You can't be here," Julian's assistant had said on the phone when she called the 27th time. "He's with a family member." "I am his family," she had said, and the door had swung on its hinges, and the coffee shop had waited to see what story would be told next. Julian stood when he saw her. He did it because manners and guilt often attend the same church. "Portia, what have you done to my life?" she hissed. Hissing is a sound only people who are losing control make without meaning to. "You cancel everything. You won't answer. And then tabloids call me about a son, Julian." He inhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." "No, you are not sorry." She leaned forward. "You are bored. You are having some kind of noble crisis where you think ruining our lives in public makes you interesting. You are humiliating me." "There is a young man upstairs who is dying if I don't stay," Julian said. "He is not a PR problem. He is not a storyline. He is my son." "You are a joke," she said, eyes sharp. "You are a sentimental joke. The board will crucify you. Society will laugh. I will—" He cut her off gently. "I can't marry you." Portia straightened like someone had pulled a string in her spine. "You can't." "I won't," he corrected. "Portia, I have been living a life designed by a family who confused legacy with love. I made choices I regret. I will not make another one because I'm afraid you and my mother and some newspaper won't like me. I'm ending this. There will be a statement. You can say what you need to say. I will not fight you, but I will not be at your side at a tasting tomorrow pretending I'm not exactly where I need to be." She slapped him. It wasn't hard. It wasn't soft. It was theatrical and sad, and the kind of thing people do when they lose the plot and want to feel like they're still in charge. The barista looked down. The coffee burned. Portia turned and walked out with her hair like a curtain. Julian touched his cheek and felt relief roll through him like a wave that had taken 23 years to reach shore. He didn't cry. Not then. He went back upstairs where people were doing the kind of work that keeps the world honest. The night before, the harvest smelled like chlorhexidine and fear you could taste. Rebecca sat at Tyler's bedside and told him stories he had loved when he was small. Because old stories sometimes help new monsters understand they cannot stay forever. "Do you remember the planetarium?" she asked. He closed his eyes and smiled in a way that tried to forgive. They turned off all the lights and made the ceiling into forever. "You asked me if forever was bigger than the ocean," she said, smiling even though her mouth hurt from holding the day. "You were 8, and you wore that sweatshirt with the dinosaur who looked like he regretted being a T-Rex." He opened his eyes. "I asked you if I could be anything if I worked hard enough." "You can," she said. "You are—" He swallowed. "Why didn't you tell me?" She inhaled. Exhaled. "Because I was afraid. Because I wanted to protect you from a man who once left me. Because every time you asked about your father, I saw you as a baby again, and I thought, I can hold this story until he is ready. I held it until I broke under it." "I am sorry." He looked at the ceiling like it might take his question. "Do you love him?" She followed his eyes and spoke to the ceiling because some questions only deserve answers if you show them a sky. "I loved him. Once. I loved who I was with him. I loved the way he made the world feel like something we could steer. I loved the way he looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Do I love him now? I don't know. I love you. I am open to what this could be, one day at a time." He nodded and closed his eyes. The beeping sang him to a sleep that wasn't rest, but wasn't fight either. They took Julian into a room that knows how to make pain into purpose. He lay on his side. He breathed anesthesia that smelled like memory foam and lemons. He drifted under with one thought he kept repeating in the way people repeat prayers when they're not sure anyone is listening. "Please let this be enough." They harvested marrow from the back of his pelvic bones. Surgeons worked with the kind of grace that belongs to people who do complex things well because they practice humility. They collected cells that had once been made inside Julian's body, that had built his blood every day since. He had been young, that now would travel into someone who had been his and not his for 23 years. Rebecca watched the transplant. She did not perform it because ethics draw lines you honor. She stood at the observation window and watched the bag hang with cells that looked like a cherry red hope. They infused Tyler with his father. They hung 100 machines between him and No. They watched and waited and counted and whispered in the hallways that she looked strong, like she knew what she was doing, and also she was collapsing like a star eaten by itself. Later, when the city slept like a beast that had found a position finally comfortable, Julian woke in recovery with a back that hurt and a heart that felt rinsed. He swung his legs off the bed too fast, and an orderly said, "Sir," and he said, "I know," and they found him a wheelchair. He insisted he didn't need, and he let them push him anyway, because sometimes allowing help is braver than refusing it. He rolled into Tyler's room and stopped where the monitors made halos around the boy man's head. Tyler looked at him through heavy eyes and said, "You look like a man who knew he had it in him." Julian laughed softly. "I always had it in me. I know." Tyler's lips tilted up. Thank you, Julian said, because gratitude moves both ways like electricity. The news broke at dawn when cities are quiet enough to hear headlines. Billionaire CEO cancels engagement amid secret son scandal. Anonymous sources say hospital involved. Photos that weren't supposed to exist, existed. Portia had friends who had a concept of loyalty that involved money and wine. Rebecca's phone shook on the nightstand like it wanted to leap to safety. She silenced it. The hospital installed additional security protocols without asking for permission, because sometimes places make decisions that save people because they know people. Julian's mother called 3 times and left one message that said, "I hope you know what you're doing," and one message that said, "I never wanted it to cost you this, but I see your face and you look alive." Julian's sister sent flowers to a floor that didn't allow them, and the nurses, moved them to a desk, and wrote a note that said, "These are for the family." They meant it. Tyler scrolled a headline and held his breath. "Well," he said, "I guess me being your son isn't a secret anymore." "I wanted you to hear it from me," Julian said, ashamed of the world and what it did to private things it did not own. "I did." Tyler's eyes had softened around the edges. "I did hear it from you. For what it's worth, that matters." Days turned into the kind of time hospitals keep, which is different from other time. It measures itself in counts and signs and the number of steps between pain and tolerable. Tyler's numbers improved in the way doctors allow themselves to call good without cursing it. His white cells climbed like a stubborn child on a slide. His hemoglobin rose like it wanted a job. His platelets stopped making him a bruise. He ate without lying. He slept because his body told him to. He dreamed. Julian read to him because reading is a safe intimacy, and they needed a way to practice. He brought books he had loved when he was young because he wanted to give Tyler everything he had wanted to share and had not. Tyler listened and pretended he wasn't listening, and then asked questions about plot points that proved he had been listening. They argued about whether protagonists must always be likable and whether ambition ruins or reveals. Sometimes Rebecca walked in and watched them without making a sound, the way you watch wildlife when you don't want to remind it that you exist and it could spook. She memorized the way Julian's face changed when Tyler smiled. She memorized the way Tyler's shoulders lowered when Julian's voice grew tired. She let her heart be curious in small, safe ways. At 2 a.m, 3 weeks post-transplant, Tyler had a night that made everyone remember this was a war, not a race. Fever, chills that turned him into a tremor, pain like knives in his bones because that's where his father lived now, and living hurts. He tried to ride it with the quiet dignity he had collected from his mother. It broke him. He cried out. Rebecca was across the hall in a consult about a different patient whose biopsy had not gone their way. She did not hear. Julian did. He walked in at a speed that ignored the limits of healing. He put his hand on Tyler's damp hair the way no one had yet dared, because that gesture belongs to fathers, and fathers had been kept like a secret. He whispered a man's lullaby, which is simply the truth said steadily. "I'm here. This is awful. You are allowed to hate this. You are allowed to yell or not. I will not leave." "It hurts," Tyler said, a confession and an accusation. "It hurts so much." "I know." Julian pressed his palm to the boy's shoulder. I wish I could hurt for you. You kind of are, Tyler said, voice shaking with a laugh that wasn't, considering they drilled your bones. Fair, Julian said, smiling even though neither of them could see it in the dark. We're a matched set. Tyler turned his face toward the sound. I wanted a dad. The room held its breath for the kind of sentence that shows up once and asks to be believed. I know, Julian said. I wanted a son. Do you love me? Tyler asked, because brave men ask the simplest questions when they need them answered. Yes, Julian said, because brave men answer simply. I love you, Tyler. I loved you before I knew your name. I love you now that I do. I love you in ways that are not going to feel like words on a screen. I am going to love you by showing up every day. Okay, Tyler whispered, because sometimes permission is the only thing that completes a sentence. Okay. When Rebecca returned to the room, she found them sleeping. Julian in a chair, his head bent like he had been poured there. Tyler with a hand still on his father's forearm, as if connection had become a reflex his body finally allowed. She stood in the doorway and wept quietly the way you weep when you realize. Your heart has been carrying a weight so long it forgot it was weight. Morning broke with soft light and the quiet footfall of nurses who knew how to step around hope. Dr. Patricia Morrison checked the chart hanging at the foot of Tyler, his bed, and wrote numbers that made the room feel a degree warmer. Rebecca stood beside her, arms crossed, gaze alternating between the screen and her son's face like she will both to line up with the future she wanted. ANC is rising, Patricia said. Neutrophils coming up. Platelets from overnight transfusion are holding. Hemoglobin nudged up. No obvious signs of acute rejection. What's the threshold you want before we start talking discharge timelines? Rebecca asked. She needed goals. Metrics. Steps that turned days into progress. Steady ANC above 1 for a few days. Platelet independence trending. Afebrile. Tolerating oral meds. And of course no signs of graft versus host disease. Patricia smiled in the way doctors do when they want you to feel the good without tempting the gods. He's moving in the right direction. Define graft versus host for me, Tyler croaked, surprising them both. His voice was morning rough. His eyes were bright in a way that made Rebecca's shoulders drop. He had been listening. He had been learning himself again. Your dad's immune cells are now your immune cells, Patricia said, stepping closer so he could see concern without pity. Sometimes donor cells see the recipient's body as foreign and try to attack. Skin, liver, GI tract are most commonly affected. We watch for rashes, jaundice, diarrhea, elevated liver enzymes. You're on immunosuppressants to keep things calm while your new marrow settles in. It's a balance. We let the good army fight infections, but we don't let it fight you. Got it, Tyler said. So basically don't be a jerk to myself. Exactly, Patricia said, smiling. How's your pain? Manageable, he said. Less like knives. More like heavy. That's healing, Patricia said. We'll keep it that way. Julian stirred in the chair and sat up slowly, wincing as the harvest site's soreness reminded him that being part of saving a life cost something in the body. He rubbed his back with a hand that would have flexed for a workout yesterday and now felt grateful for Tylenol. He looked at Tyler first. He looked at Rebecca second, then at Patricia with a nod that acknowledged the quiet miracle of good labs. Can I get in on the morning brief? He asked. The voice of a man learning a new language and wanting to pronounce it correctly. Counts rising, Patricia said. We like it. We keep liking it for a while, and then we call it a trend. That's the whole show. I can work with trends, Julian said, and it was the first time he had used business language, in a room where business didn't belong and somehow it didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like translation. What's my role today? Eat, Rebecca said, turning toward him without irony. Hydrate. Donor fatigue is real. You are not indestructible. Julian smiled. That is a new opinion about me. It is the correct one, she said, then looked at her son. You feeling up for some breakfast? Tyler made a face. If it tastes like plastic oatmeal again, no. If it tastes like something people in movies eat, yes. I'll see what I can do, Rebecca said. Dad, Tyler said, and then paused because his own mouth had surprised him. The syllable hung in the air like a tightrope. Do you know any place near here that makes pancakes that don't taste like hospital? Julian blinked. Words had done something to the room. I do. I know a place that has no right to be as good as it is. I can sneak out for 10 minutes and sneak back in with contraband that might restore your faith in better. Tyler looked at Rebecca. Mask for you, she said. Hand hygiene. No visitors while he eats. Nurses will pretend they didn't see. Patricia's smile tipped the corner of her mouth. Nurses are very good at pretending. As Julian left, a pager vibrated in Rebecca's coat pocket. The number flashing was one she recognized in the way you recognize storm clouds. Cross Industries. Board liaison. She stepped into the hallway to answer. Yes, Dr. Hayes, the voice said. Sorry to bother you. I'm calling from Mr. Cross's office to inform you we've scheduled an emergency board call at 10. Media fallout, leadership concerns. We've been unable to reach Mr. Cross. He may be ignoring us. We wondered if you might inform him. I'll tell him, Rebecca said. She almost added that leaders existed in rooms that didn't take minutes. She didn't. 10. She put the phone away and leaned her head against the cool wall for a second. The board wants blood. The press wants a narrative. The man who had rebuilt a life on quiet discipline now had to choose how to fight. She went back into the room and found Tyler watching the doorway like a dog who had learned to read footsteps. You look worried, he said. The board wants your father on a call, she said. The board can wait. Put it on speaker, Tyler said. Let's see how he handles them. Why? She asked. Because I need to know who he is under pressure, Tyler said. I only knew him as a boss who impressed me in meetings. I need to know him as a man who chooses me in one. She nodded. That's fair. All three were in the room when Julian returned with a paper bag that smelled like butter, sugar, and the kind of comfort you only trust if someone brings it. He set it on the tray table like an offering in a temple. Blueberry, real maple syrup. No judgment if you drown them. Board call in 15, Rebecca said gently. Of course there is, Julian said. He wasn't sarcastic. He was simply a man who understood the rhythm of institutions and knew this beat by heart. Let's eat first. They ate. Tyler used plastic utensils and made noises that might have been gratitude. Rebecca took 2 bites and then realized she wanted more. Julian drank coffee from a paper cup like it was sacrament. When the tray was clear and the smell of syrup hung in the air like an echo, Rebecca set her phone on the bedside table and tapped the screen. Speaker. The call connected. The robotic voice announced participants. A dozen names. Familiar. Heavy. The business of empires breathes through speakerphones. A chair cleared his throat. Julian, thank you for joining. We're concerned. Of course you are, Julian said. His tone was polite without bending. Good morning. We want to address the media situation, another voice said. The engagement cancellation. The story about my son, Julian said, interrupting without raising his voice. You can say the word. He's not a scandal. He's my son. He collapsed at work with a hematologic condition. I brought him to the hospital. His mother is the chief of hematology. I am his bone marrow donor. That is the situation. Silence. Then the chair again. We are sympathetic. But the optics will be managed, Julian said. By me, with a statement from my office acknowledging the truth, protecting my son's privacy, and articulating our company's commitment to supporting employees through medical crises with dignity and resources. I will also be stepping back from day-to-day operations for a defined period to be with my family. Gasps in miniature across the line. Step back, someone repeated. Julian, the market values companies that are led by people with clarity, Julian said. My clarity is that family comes first. I will remain in my role. Our COO will handle daily operations. You will not lose access. You will gain a leader who isn't pretending to be in 2 places at once. The chair tried one more time. The press will exploit this. They will tie it to our product launch. They will say what sells advertising, Julian said. And then they will move on to the next storm, because that's how weather and media work. I'm not going to argue about optics while my son counts neutrophils. Rebecca watched Tyler's face as he listened. The corners of his mouth softened. His eyes steadied. He looked like someone who had spent a lifetime holding grudges at arm's length, and now decided to let one go because it didn't fit anymore. Mr. Cross, another board member said, voice cautious. Is there anything we can do? Yes, Julian said. Follow the policy draft in your inbox titled Cross Cares. It outlines paid leave for severe medical events, mental health coverage expansion, and flexible schedules for caregivers. We should have done it years ago. We do it now. We'll review, the chair said. which in board language means we're surprised, but we see the inevitability. Thank you, Julian said. I'll be available at 2, not before. When the call ended, the room felt both lighter and more defined. Tyler looked at his father. You talk like you mean it. I do, Julian said. I spent 23 years saying what was expected. I'm done. If this moment made you believe in leaders who choose people over optics, drop a comment that says, choose people, Dr. Phillips whispered to us. And share this video with someone in management who needs to hear it. A few hours later, the day delivered an unexpected visitor. The knock was soft, the kind of knock people learn in houses where crying might live. Rebecca opened the door and stared into the gray eyes she hadn't seen in a decade. The older version of Julian's eyes, lined by years that had sometimes been kind and sometimes had not. The woman was elegant in a way that money and grief made gentle. She held a small bouquet of white freesia the hospital would not allow past the threshold. Eleanor, Rebecca said. It wasn't a question. The name had lived under her tongue for 23 years. She had used it like a whetstone. She had also used it as a prayer. Rebecca, Eleanor said, voice steady and brittle. May I speak with you? Outside, for a moment. Rebecca stepped into the hall and closed the door behind her. She kept her spine straight without dramatizing it. I'm surprised you came. I'm not, Eleanor said. Her hands did not fidget. They hovered over the flowers as if they were small birds she could release if necessary. I learned about your son, about my grandson, from the worst possible place. The news, that's my fault. Rebecca opened her mouth and then closed it. There were so many versions of this conversation she had imagined. Most of them involved fury. None involved this. Eleanor, she said carefully, he doesn't know you. He barely knows his father. This is delicate. I know, Eleanor said. I didn't come to demand a role. I came to say something I should have said 23 years ago. I was wrong. I was cruel. I chose what my parents taught me to choose. My husband and I controlled our son like he was a commodity. I judged you without meeting you. I judged you because you were not us. I wanted to keep our name in the pages that mattered to our set. I forgot that names live in people, not in magazines. Rebecca did not plan on crying in a hallway. She did anyway, quietly. The way grief sometimes reaches back and touches you on the shoulder, then points at a new grief and says, see, it was connected all along. I wanted to tell you to go to hell, Rebecca said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I still kind of do. You should, Eleanor said, and I will go, if you ask me to. But before I do, may I tell you something only the women in our family know? Rebecca nodded because curiosity and compassion share a wall. When I was 20, Eleanor said, voice lowering, I fell in love with a jazz pianist. He worked nights. He smelled like cigarette smoke and the kind of joy you drink. He was not from our circle. He had hands that knew how to make sound into a room you wanted to live in. My father found out. He sent me to Paris for a summer. When I returned, I married the man chosen for me. My pianist moved to New York. He made a record that nobody has heard of now. Sometimes I listen to it alone and pretend I chose him. Rebecca stared. The story rewrote a woman she had only known as an antagonist. I trained my son to believe that duty is love, Eleanor said. He believed me. He hurt you because I failed him and you. I cannot fix what I broke, but I can be honest now, and I can ask permission to meet my grandson when he is ready. Rebecca let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. He is still angry. He will be suspicious. As he should be, Eleanor said. Suspicion protected him. When he is less angry, tell him I make terrible cookies and excellent tea, that I collect records and regrets, and that I'm willing to be whoever he needs me to be or no one at all. I'll tell him, Rebecca said. Eleanor handed her the bouquet. For the nurses' station, she said. For the people who make miracles ordinary. Thank you, Rebecca said, and they both pretended the moment didn't feel like a blessing. Inside, Tyler was asleep again. Julian looked up when Rebecca returned. She told him who was in the hall. He exhaled like someone had unbuttoned his collar. I'll talk to her later, he said. I'm not ready to be her son today. That's reasonable, Rebecca said. She didn't ask for absolution. She asked for mercy. That's new, he said, and the sadness didn't stay in the room. It left, like it had somewhere else to be. By week 4, the hospital became a place Tyler belonged and a place he could finally leave. The counts held. The fevers stayed away. The rash that threatened to be something wasn't. The doctors were cautious and pleased. The nurses hugged with their eyes because their hands carried tasks. Discharge day arrived with a packet of instructions as thick as a novella, and a lecture about hand sanitizer that would have made any germ proud. "You will wear a mask in crowds," Patricia said, going through the list, like a teacher who wanted to give an A and would accept nothing less. "You will avoid raw foods. You will avoid sick people. You will call us at the first sign of fever. Your mom will remember the schedule for medications. Your father will pretend he does, and he will call your mom to confirm." "I can handle a spreadsheet," Julian said. "Some would say it's my core competency." "This one's in color," Patricia said. "Good luck." Tyler laughed, the sound bringing color to his own cheeks. "So where do I go?" With the question, the room got quiet. The way rooms do, and the next step is not just a step, but a philosophy. "You are always home with me," Rebecca said. "That never changes." "And you are welcome with me," Julian said. "Always. No expectation, no pressure. I have an extra room that is not so extra anymore if you want to see what the view looks like at night." "Can we do both?" Tyler asked. "Split time. Try it." "I want to know what your life looks like, Dad." Without disappearing from the one Mom built, Rebecca nodded immediately. "Yes." Julian's voice thickened. "Yes." They walked Tyler out of the hospital the way people carry candles in churches. Slowly, with reverence, the elevator opened into sunlight and ordinary city sounds that felt like the loudest thing Tyler had ever heard. Paparazzi had thinned because the story had been wrung dry for now. Security escorted them to a side exit. They got into two cars because symbols matter. One car went to Rebecca's house, the other to Julian's penthouse with Tyler's overnight bag and a debate about whether he should learn to like herbal tea. That night at Rebecca's, they sat around a small table stacked with years of dinner stories. Tyler ate chicken soup that tasted like childhood and listened to his mother hum while she did the dishes. It was safe. It was the place he had always been. 2 nights later, he carried a duffel into Julian's penthouse and paused at a window that didn't know how not to show the whole city. The place was tasteful, beautiful, and lonely. Modern art that talked to itself. Leather couches that looked like you apologized before sitting. Silence that had never been interrupted by dreams. "This is intimidating," Tyler said, dropping his bag. "It looks like a magazine lives here, and it would get mad if I spilled cereal." "We can change that," Julian said. "What do you need it to be?" "Messier," Tyler said. "Less careful, more human." "Done," Julian said, with a sincerity that felt like a renovation. "Let's start with dinner." They tried to cook. They burned garlic. They laughed. They opened windows. They ordered pizza. They ate on the floor because couches were suddenly too formal. Tyler put his feet on the table and waited to be chastised. Julian lifted his own feet and matched him. "What's one thing you wish you'd done with me when I was a kid?" Tyler asked, leaning back. "Everything," Julian said, smiling without self-pity. "But specifically, Saturday morning pancakes with too much syrup, late night star watching, and teaching you chess poorly because I always cheated when I was a kid and my sister still hasn't forgiven me." "We can do 2 out of 3, Tyler said. "I hate chess." "Good," Julian said. "I can stop pretending I like it." They watched a movie. They didn't talk during the good parts. They paused for conversations that movies sometimes start. Tyler fell asleep on the couch. Julian covered him with a throw blanket and stood for a long time looking at a life he could have missed if one day in a conference room had gone differently. He didn't indulge in regret. He spoke out loud in the empty kitchen. "Thank you," he said to no one and everyone, "for the second chance." The media story did not die. Portia gave a wounded interview to a magazine people read on airplanes, painting herself as a wronged fiancé and Julian as a man in midlife crisis. She used words like betrayal and humiliation. She mentioned another woman and secret child. She smiled through fake tears. The comments were a war zone. Some applauded her. Some saw through the script. Meanwhile, Julian's office released a simple statement. Julian Cross has recently learned that he is the father of a 22-year-old son. His son experienced an acute medical emergency and is currently recovering from a bone marrow transplant for which Mr. Cross was the donor. He is grateful for the medical team and asks for privacy while his family focuses on healing. Cross Industries remains committed to our employees' health, and we are expanding our benefits to include paid medical leave, caregiver support, and mental health services. It went viral for the right reasons. Employees shared stories of losses that had gone unsupported. Advocacy groups praised the shift. The board realized the optics were, in fact, good. 3 weeks into the new normal, Julian knocked on a door he had waited 23 years to knock on. A townhouse in a neighborhood that smelled like jasmine and laundry detergent. Rebecca opened. She wore jeans and a sweater the color of rain. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like someone who had done a long stretch of emotion and found a breath at the end. "Therapist," Julian said, holding up a business card. "Family, group, individual, I made an appointment. If you'll come." She glanced at the card. "Dr. Luis Romero, Family Systems. You keep surprising me." "I'm learning how," he said. "Family therapy isn't tidy. It doesn't look like television. It looks like people stumbling through a grammar they didn't learn as kids. It looks like long pauses, gentle redirections, tissues passed down a couch. It looks like a young man saying, 'I am angry,' and an older man saying, 'I know,' and a woman saying, 'I am sorry,' and a therapist asking, 'How do we move forward, not to erase, but to include what hurt us?'" Dr. Romero's office had plants that had been watered by tears and sunlight. He welcomed them in, sat in a recliner that had seen confessions, and set boundaries in the first 5 minutes. "We are not here to litigate the past," he said. "We are here to tell the truth, to feel what that truth does to the body, and to practice new ways of being a family. We will name behaviors without calling names. We will ask for what we need. We will not fix everything today. If you stay with me, you will leave understanding yourself better and each other deeply. Are you willing?" "Yes," Rebecca said. "Yes," Julian said. "Yes," Tyler said, quieter, then louder. "Yes. Start with 1 sentence each," Dr. Romero said. "Complete the phrase, 'I am here because.'" Rebecca looked at her son and exhaled. "I am here because I love my child, because I held a secret too long and it hurt him, because I want to be brave enough to love again without letting fear call it safety." Julian looked at them both. "I am here because I want to be a father who shows up, because I have lived a life that looked good and felt empty. Because I want to earn forgiveness and not ask for it like I am entitled to it." Tyler swallowed. "I am here because I almost died, because hospitals make everything clear, because I want to stop being split in half between wanting a father and hating him for not being there, because I want to stop feeling like I have to protect Mom from my feelings." "Good," Dr. Romero said. "Now we can begin." They met weekly. They cried. They laughed once at an absurd moment when Dr. Romero used a sports metaphor and none of them understood it. The therapist apologized and switched to music. It worked. In week 3, Julian brought a letter. "I wrote down 23 things I missed," he said, handing it to Tyler, "because I needed to record them, not to ask you to read them as a petition, just to acknowledge, to witness time." Tyler unfolded the paper. His father's handwriting was neat, expensive, the kind taught by nuns. The list began simple. "I missed your first breath. I missed your first night home. I missed your first steps. I missed the first time you slept through the night. I missed your favorite color phase. I missed breaking up your first fight. I missed yelling at someone for being mean to you. I missed teaching you how to apologize. I missed teaching you how not to. I missed the day you learned to ride a bike. I missed the day you decided books could be better than people. I missed your 8th birthday at the planetarium. I missed telling you that you were right about the universe being bigger than the ocean. I missed." It went on. It was not manipulative. It was an index of sorrow. Tyler folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, "I can't give you those, but I can give you this. My next thing. Will you come to my follow-up appointment next week? Hear the word remission with me, if we get to hear the word." "Yes," Julian said, throat tight. "Yes." Months turned. Tyler's hair grew back in that soft post-chemo way even though he hadn't. Had chemo, a visual symbol that bodies can look like beginnings. He returned to Cross Industries part-time. His first day back was awkward, and then it wasn't. People didn't know how to greet him. He solved it by walking into the analytics bullpen with a box of donuts and a grin. "I lived," he said. "I'm here. Please don't cry. Also, someone show me what I missed, because if anyone touched my code, I will fight you with a hug." Laughter broke whatever glass had been in the room. Work welcomed him on his terms. HR had installed new leave policies. Managers had training on how to support employees during medical crises. There was a new door sign near the wellness room. Cross Cares, sponsored by the CEO, designed by a junior analyst who had almost died. Tyler went to Julian's office and closed the door without theatrics. He sat. He put his hands on his knees like he was about to present quarterly numbers. "I want to come back," he said. "I also don't want anyone to think I'm getting anything I didn't earn. I need to not work for you directly." "Agreed," Julian said. "You report to May in product strategy. She's smarter than me anyway." "She terrifies me," Tyler said, smiling. "She terrifies me too," Julian said. "You'll get along." They settled into a rhythm. Monday and Tuesday at Rebecca's. Wednesday and Thursday at Julian's. Fridays flexible. Weekends as decided by breakfast waffle cravings. Family therapy continuing. Small steps into big trust. One evening, after a session where Tyler admitted a dream in which he was 5 and his father lifted him easily, Rebecca and Julian found themselves walking along the Embarcadero as fog rolled in like a secret you could see. "Do you ever think about the night we danced in your kitchen and the power went out?" Julian asked, looking at the water. "I still have the candle holder," Rebecca said. "It's ugly." "It is," he said, laughing. "You loved it." "I loved you," she said. The honesty hung for a second and found a place to sit. "Do you still feel like you need to make grand gestures to prove this time is different?" "No," he said. "I need to make small ones, daily. The grand ones are for magazines, the small ones are for us." They stopped. He touched her cheek with a gentleness that remembered what pressure had broken. She didn't flinch. He kissed her. It wasn't a cure. It was a beginning. "Don't run," she whispered. "I'm done running," he said. Summer slid into a fall generous with light. Tyler's 6-month follow-up was a tense joy. Dr. Morrison walked in with the final lab printout and an expression that made the room inhale. She sat. She looked at them all. "Remission," she said simply. "Full engraftment. No chronic GVHD. You did the weird miracle we asked for." Rebecca laughed. It came out as a sob. Julian put his arm around his son before he remembered to ask for permission. Tyler leaned into it to answer the question. They walked out of the clinic and into sunlight that didn't feel like it had to be quiet anymore. Julian cleared his throat like a man about to say something that mattered. "Dinner," he said. "All of us. To celebrate remission and other words we'll invent later." They went to a small restaurant on a side street where the owner greeted Rebecca by name because she had worked night shifts there in residency for quick meals. The three of them sat at a table near a window and ordered too much. They told stories. They teased. They avoided the things that would spoil the taste of victory and save them for a room with a therapist later. When dessert arrived, Julian took a small velvet box out of his jacket and set it on the table. Rebecca's eyes widened, then narrowed with alarm. "Wait," she said. "We said slow." "Open it," he said. "Please." She did. Inside was a simple gold band, 3 tiny stones nestled low. Not a proclamation, an invitation. "I'm not asking you to marry me here," he said, smiling at her expression of relief and intrigue. "Not now. Not like this. I'm asking you to let me try to earn the right to ask you properly. To let me put this on your finger as a promise ring for grown-ups, not college kids. I want to demonstrate consistency before I ask for forever. Will you wear it? Will you let me court you like we didn't get to when we were stupid and young?" Rebecca laughed through tears. "No one has said court to me since my grandmother told me stories about dances in gymnasiums. Yes, I'll wear it, and I'll tell you when you've earned the right to ask the other question. Please don't make it on a ski lift," Tyler said. "I will never forgive you if my family story contains a ski lift." "Noted," Julian said. "If you're glad they're choosing small promises over performative gestures, hit like, and tell me in the comments the best small gesture anyone ever made for you. Subscribe so you don't miss the moment this family stands under string lights and says words that rebuild houses." The day Julian decided to ask properly began like any other. Work, therapy, a text about dinner. It ended at the beach, the same stretch of sand where he and Rebecca had once come when they were young and poor, stealing kisses like they might be arrested for them. Now, the sun was a coin dropping toward the ocean. The sky burned itself out in pink and then kept burning in gold. Tyler sat on a blanket a few yards away, a chaperone who definitely did not feel like a chaperone. "I'm just here to supervise the ocean," he'd joked. "It has a history of being moody." Julian took Rebecca's hands in his. He had the ring in his pocket. He had the words in his chest. He had the courage in his legs to kneel on sand and accept the grit. "Rebecca Hayes," he said, and his voice didn't shake. "I loved you when I was 25 and stupid. I love you now when I am older and less stupid and more careful. I will never ask you to forget the ways I failed you. I will ask you to marry me with the understanding that the man on this beach is not the boy you lost. He is the father who stayed. He is the partner who shows up. He is the person who has learned that if you don't choose love, you are choosing performance. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I have become the man who deserves you?" Rebecca looked down at the man kneeling in the same place their past had watched them. She looked at her son, who pretended to be very invested in a seagull. She looked at the ocean that had been there when she cried alone at 23. She looked at the sky that had seen her walk into a hospital and choose to be useful when she couldn't be safe. She nodded. She didn't trust her voice until she did. "Yes," she said, and it sounded like the last defense she didn't need anymore, going quietly. Julian slid the ring onto her finger. Tyler stood and clapped like a dork. "About time," he said. "I was going to propose for you both if you kept acting like adults." They laughed. They cried a little. They walked back to the car like people who had made the kind of decision. That doesn't solve everything and does solve the thing that matters. The wedding was small. It was held in the hospital garden because life had a sense of irony and because it was the holiest place they knew. 50 guests. No social obligations. People who had watched them change. People who had held their breath with them and then exhaled. The path was lined with lanterns. The oak tree wore string lights like a crown. A child chased bubbles that caught the light and turned into worlds. Rebecca walked down the aisle on her son's arm. Tyler steadied her at the step like he had steadying in his muscles now after months of rebuilding strength. He whispered, "You deserve this." "So do you," she said, squeezing his fingers. "You deserve a family. You built it with us." Julian waited. He had never worn a suit better, not because of tailoring, because of relief. His eyes shone. He didn't try to hide it. The officiant began, not with legal language, but with a story of a collapse that taught 3 people how to stand. "We are not here to pretend," the officiant said. "We are here to tell the truth about what love does when it is asked to wait, when it is asked to break, and when it is given the chance to build again." Julian's vows were simple. "I will not promise you perfection," he said, taking Rebecca's hands. "I will promise you presence. I will not promise you easy. I will promise you honest. I will hold space for your history without asking it to be smaller for my comfort. I will love our son with you in ways that make him feel chosen every day. I will put family before optics, before meetings, before fear. I will be the man I became when I stopped obeying ghosts. I do." Rebecca's vows were steady. "I will not pretend the past didn't shape us," she said, voice carrying like something that had trained in lecture halls and learned softness at bedsides. "I will forgive without forgetting, because forgetting is dangerous, and forgiveness is brave. I will choose you in daily ways. I will ask for what I need instead of punishing you for not guessing. I will love you in the small hours when families become families. I will keep building the life we earned, not the one we were told to live." "I do." They exchanged rings. The officiant asked a question nobody in the garden doubted the answer to. They kissed. The garden erupted like a house that had been waiting for a song to lift the roof. At the reception, Tyler stood and cleared his throat. He wasn't nervous. He was reverent. He held a glass of sparkling cider like an instrument. He looked at the 2 people he belonged to and the people who belonged to them. "A year and a half ago," he said, "I collapsed at work. I don't recommend it as a way to make friends or start a family. But it turns out medical emergencies are very honest. They make you tell the truth. They make you put down whatever you were carrying that didn't have your name on it. They make you pick up what matters." My father rushed me to the ER and a doctor asked him, "Are you his father?" That question didn't just save my life. It saved all of ours. I met my dad in a hospital room. I learned forgiveness in a therapist's office. I watched 2 people who had every reason to keep their hearts safe choose to risk them again. Today I watch my parents marry each other under a tree that has seen people die and live and fall in love and say goodbye. That feels right. Because family is not about the pages in the book starting in the right order. It's about people deciding to turn a page together. So here's to second chances, to small promises, to pancakes, to hospitals that make miracles ordinary, to my parents who chose each other and chose me. I love you both. Please kiss again because I want to get a good photo. They did. People cried. People laughed. Dr. Morrison toasted with a line that made everyone cheer. To remission and romance, she said, may they both last. If you're wiping tears, you're not alone. Hit like if Tyler's toast hit you in the chest. Share this with someone who needs to believe that families can be rebuilt. And tell me in the comments, what line from the vows or the toast will you carry into your week? Later, when the lights had dimmed and the last slice of cake had been smuggled into a nurse's lounge, the three of them sat on a bench at the edge of the garden. The night was cool. The stars were something you could almost hear. I want to tell my kids about tonight, Tyler said, leaning back. You want kids? Julian asked, trying to sound casual and failing. Maybe, Tyler said. Someday. After I figure out how to teach a spreadsheet to tell jokes. You'll be a remarkable father, Rebecca said. You already practice. Is it okay that I'm still angry sometimes? Tyler asked, not quite looking at them. It sneaks up. A song, an old photo, a sentence. I feel it, and then I feel guilty for feeling it when everything is so good. It's okay, Rebecca said. Anger is a map. It shows you where you were hurt. It's also proof you're alive, Julian said. I hope I never stop feeling the sting of what I did wrong. It keeps me right. They sat in the kind of silence that families earn. No performance, no speech, just being. The hospital windows glowed behind them like a constellation of rooms where someone might be saying yes to life right now because someone else had said yes before them. 3 years later, the Crosshayes family looked different in all the ways that counted, and a few that were funny. Tyler stood in the Cross Industries auditorium giving a talk to new hires about resilience. He spoke without notes. He told the story of collapsing at work and finding more than a diagnosis. He told them about Cross Cares, the program he helped design, and how it kept 2 employees with cancer on the payroll with dignity last year. He told them about therapy. He told them about choosing a job that protected their life, not one that ate it. After, he took the elevator to the 10th floor and walked into a small conference room where a teenager and her mother sat with a social worker. The girl had dark circles, and that bravery kids who have been sick too long wear like a badge they wish they didn't own. Hi, Tyler said, sitting at their level. I'm Tyler. I had a transplant too. It sucks. It also saved my life. The girl looked at him like a person who had been asked to imagine a future and now saw it sitting in a chair. Does it stop hurting? Not all at once, Tyler said. But it does. And then it hurts less often. And then one day you realize you didn't think about it for 3 hours, and you forgive yourself for forgetting. He gave them his number. He gave them hope that felt more like a permission slip than a slogan. He headed to lunch with a CO worker who did not know him as a miracle, just as a brilliant analyst with a dry wit and an annoying habit of reorganizing shared drives. Across town, Rebecca finished rounds and sat at her desk to dictate notes. She was chief of hematology and the co-founder of a foundation that paid for single parents to finish medical degrees because she remembered every midnight she had made it through by sheer stubbornness. Her phone buzzed. She smiled at the photo. Julian and a toddler with cheeks like apples and hair like a cloud. The toddler wore a t-shirt that said big feelings and a grin that said trouble. The caption read, "We tried to bake. We made a mess. We need a grown-up." Rebecca texted back, "Be there in 10. She stood and told her team she was leaving early. They teased. They covered. Hospitals run on people who are good at loving other people. Julian's building's doorman greeted her by name. She rode up to find flour in places flour has no business being. The toddler barreled toward her and yelled, "Mama," with a confidence that had taken years to earn in a different child and arrived instantly in this one. Rebecca lifted their daughter and breathed in sugar and future. "How did you get flour on the ceiling?" she asked Julian, who looked caught. "Apparently whipped cream can be launched," he said, pointing to a bowl that sat innocently on the counter. "I have learned physics." Their daughter giggled. "Up," she said. "Up again. You'll get more up later," Rebecca said, kissing her nose. "Right now we wipe down. Then we go pick up your brother for dinner." "Brother," the little girl said, clapping. Tyler, Julian corrected, chest going soft in a way that made him taller. He took Rebecca into his arms a second later and kissed her with the slightly flour-dusted mouth of a man who had discovered the point of every other thing he had ever done. "I love you." "Say it again," she said, because asking is a form of intimacy too. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love the life we built after we survived the one we were given. The Cross Hayes Foundation's annual gala was nothing like the galas Julian used to attend. It had good food and zero speeches that used the word legacy more than necessary. It had a silent auction table with things actually useful. It had a dance floor where donors danced with transplant patients. It had a wall where people posted sticky notes with the words that had saved them. Forgive. Try. Rest. Ask. Stay. Rebecca took the stage for 5 minutes because funders like to see a leader. She told a story about a night when she wept in a doorway, watching 2 people sleep. She didn't mention names. Everyone present already knew. She didn't preach. She invited. We built this foundation to fund research that saves lives and to support the life that happens around the saving, she said. If you are a single parent in school, we see you. If you are a donor who walked into a hospital scared and left sore and proud, we honor you. If you are a patient with numbers on a chart and a name that gets said 100 times a day by people who love you, we're with you. This is what family looks like when we decide to be one. Julian followed with a promise to keep showing up with time and money because both are necessary. Tyler followed with a joke about writing the grant application for his own family. People laughed. People gave. People went home thinking about what had broken them and what had made them. At Tyler's 5-year post-transplant appointment, Dr. Morrison walked in with that same look she had worn the day she said remission. Only now it had the ease of time behind it. Cured, she said, letting the word ring. You are the good story we tell interns when they think medicine is only about losing. Tyler hugged her, a thing he would not have done 3 years ago, because hugging doctors had seemed like hugging institutions. Now he hugged the person who had said truths to him gently. He stopped by the infusion center on his way out and sat with a young man receiving his first chemo infusion. He asked him about his favorite video game. He told him his had been a racing game that rewarded staying on course more than speed. Staying on course, the kid said. That's boring. It is, Tyler said, smiling. And it gets you home. Dr. Phillips stepped into frame in your mind and spoke directly to you the way she does when the story has emptied something out of you and filled it back up with better. You have just walked with a family from collapse to wedding vows, through therapy and headlines, across hospital gardens and beach sunsets. If this story is stirring something, let me give you the distilled lesson the Hayes Cross family would want you to carry. Secrets feel protective but become prisons. Truth doesn't erase pain, but it makes healing possible. Second chances are not granted. They are earned in the small, ordinary acts that say, I will be here again tomorrow. Forgiveness is not the absence of anger. It is the decision to keep choosing through it. Family is not a noun. It is a verb. It is the daily practice of showing up, telling the truth, and listening when someone tells you who they are. If you were Rebecca, would you have told Julian at the beginning? If you were Julian, would you have obeyed your parents and married someone you didn't love? If you were Tyler, could you forgive both? There aren't easy answers. There are honest ones. Share yours in the comments so someone who feels alone in their choice can see themselves and feel less alone. If this journey gave you something, do 3 things for me. Subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips so you never miss a story that reminds you what hearts are for. Share this video with one person who needs to believe that people can change. And tell me the moment that hit you hardest. Was it the first time Tyler said dad? The board call? The vows? The word remission? I read what you write. Wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, let this be your reminder. You can set down someone else's expectations. You can choose love over performance. You can start again. You can build a life with small promises. You can be the person who asks the question that saves a life. Are you his father? Are you her friend? Are you the one who stays? Say yes. I'm Dr. Phillips. Thank you for watching. Stay. Love.